I choose Defiant Jazz.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we are discussing Severance, Episode 7, Defiant Jazz, which is a good time to bring up the fact that any song that isn't immediately recognizable as jazz is defiantly jazz. So I don't want any more comments on the Who not being jazz in that season 2 trailer breakdown. All right, it's Defiant Jazz, much like this 4-minute Defiant Jazz scatting I'm about to do in this intro. This episode begins where the last ended. Mark and Ragabi being chased by Mr. Graner, though they make it a point to leave his pursuit unknown and unshown for these early scenes. We learned that Ragabi was the doctor who put the implant in their heads while working at Lumon, and that if Petey would have followed the post-operation instructions, he would have likely not died.
Maybe I don't want it deactivated.
Right.
They discuss the ethics of Mark's choice and if his Innie wants the same thing. She leans into this idea that he wonders if Innie Mark is happy or not, and then calls him a baby for only being severed for about 2 years. Mark believes that the trade is fair. Innie Mark gets to have his own life. He gets to exist, and in exchange, Outie Mark does too.
For all intents and purposes, he is you. Do you really think he's different down there? Combs his hair differently, laughs at different jokes. Maybe he loves it, you're right. Maybe he dreams every day about clawing his way to the surface.
Mark insists that he's not a bad person, but the truth is, he doesn't know. The other half of his existence could frolic in despair and wish, as Ragabi points out, to escape from the maze that he drew. This is the pinnacle moment of Mark's choice, and in some ways I wish the episodes were designed a little bit differently to allow this to have been the finale of the last episode, because really this is everything. The hero faced with the perspective that he didn't consider, as he must now be accountable for his actions. Really the only question there is left to ask is, would you reintegrate if you were Mark? Would you risk your own life and prosperity to stop the other you from feeling like a prisoner for 40 hours a week? I feel like you would have to consider that as a real possibility of how he could be feeling now that the doctor who creates Innies is telling you as much. You don't know that you need help right now, for instance, but acknowledge that all of us need help in something. Will you hear the youth screaming F Lumon, or acknowledge the doctor going through extreme measures to give you whispered intelligence? Or admit that corporations could very well exist outside of morality when push comes to shove?
I'm not a bad person.
I think you want to do what's right. Both of you.
They talk for a little bit longer about all the boring ethics I just discussed, and then
Mr. Scout.
Mr. Graner comes out of nowhere, and then so does Ragabi.
Shit.
She murders him in one of the most shocking moments of this first season, and then Mark quickly becomes an accomplice. He helps her move the body, and then goes to throw up.
Don't! Your DNA's in that!
She takes the master security card from Mr. Grainer's dying body and tells Mark to keep it on him, that any Mark will know what to do with it. He is concerned and confused, uncertain what to do nor who to trust anymore, realizing that he just helped move a body, and then...
It's gonna be okay. We'll finish what Petey started, Mark. Now get the fuck out of here!
He runs out of the old college wing and throws up in the alley, leaving his DNA at the scene of the crime. I mean, just a rookie mistake, man. What are you doing? Watch anything where murder happens. You know, come on. The intro plays, and then we return to him taking off all of his clothes, shoes included, and stuffing them into the trash. Just as he pushes the stash under the sink, Alexa rounds the corner.
Where were you?
Who, me?
Yeah,
Just...
I heard the car.
He stands there in his skivvies trying to find the right words, knowing that the breadcrumb trail from Grainer's dead body to his kitchen is already being discovered.
I've been up for an hour and you weren't here.
Okay, just needed to drive a little.
Are you okay?
It feels like she is falling for it, but the shaky camera stresses the uncertainty on both sides. She asks if it would help for her to leave, and he, of course, says...
Maybe,
which is an answer that she did not want to hear. The next morning, Mark stuffs the murder clothes into the trash bin and gets caught by Miss Cobel, another person who can attest to the actions that Mark took directly after the murder, should that ever be called into question. We see Mr. Milchick testing the new security measures in order to keep the wandering flock at bay, and then retrieving the card that Dylan stole from O&D, hidden directly behind the toilet to confirm what we already know, and that is that Dylan is the shit.
Mr. Milchick, pleasure to see you, sir. So early.
Please, sit.
Thank you.
They discuss the missing 7199G that Dylan stole and how delighted a character named Oswald will be. 7199G feels like it could give some insight into the O&D room production if the O&D department does have A through Z columns filled with 3D printers fulfilling all of management's needs. Maybe 7199 is the number of items that have been printed for whatever the G group of recipients actually is. Since they discuss the item creation like so,
Executive wing upstairs. Then again, last week's output had more of an aggressive feel.
this gives me the impression that they're making at least one item per day. Assuming that it is one item per day, this would date the G group of recipients having received items or maybe existing at all being around 20 years ago, 19.72-ish years exactly. But really, this is just me correlating some numbers and existing with the idea that A through Z columns could correlate to the different groups of people, though we don't really know if the other columns exist at all, nor if they correlate to groups or like the last names or anything like that. G could just mean great job, listener, on hitting that subscribe button. You know, we don't know.
Now we can focus on the final preparations.
That we can.
Without interruptions.
That we shall.
Excellent.
They discuss the final preparations and the amount of work being done to make it happen. The level of importance being stressed here is high, and Mr. Milchick's intense, soul-piercing eyes and candid smile reinforce that fact. But it's meant to cloak the retirement party, and they are likely talking about getting his replacement trained up or making sure that his exit interview is already complete, if I had to guess anything at all.
You've been a great leader to this department, Burt G.
Thank you.
You deserve something special.
Not another trip to the break room, I hope. Yesterday was quite enough.
No, not that.
I love this. This little line from Burt to show some part of him still sits in defiance of the person who sent him to the break room yesterday. Like, he is an old man who had been with the company for years. The number of times in which he has gone to the break room and it would be scary to him, it would be limited, right? As proven by Dylan already giving tips on how to game the system after Helly's first time going through it. I imagine Burt here is just reciting the lines, staring the other person in the face until he finally just closes his eyes and continues reading with no remorse at all. Like, challenging the person who is, being read to, challenging them to concede first. Like, the person reading or the person listening both are being tortured in some kind of way here, or maybe not. I think I'd just like to imagine Burt G as a G like that.
Dylan G. Good morning.
Side note here, if the last names do correlate to the columns, Burt G and Dylan G may have a lot more in common than they realize. Maybe that's why both of them are the ones that we see in season 1 spreading the misinformation about the others. G is, more gullible or more receptive to like these stories that the others could be out for them kind of thing. But I'm really, just throwing that out there. No side note.
What happened last night is called the overtime contingency. It's a safeguard we occasionally employ to remotely awaken workers off-site. And I didn't consult Miss Cobel because she's been so stressed.
They discuss the nighttime terror that Innie Dylan just experienced, being suddenly woken from what would be perceivably his sleep to a new environment in the blink of an eye, suddenly trapped in a closet with Mr. Milchick's bright, shining, smiling face and yours, and the smile no longer being present, and then a child runs in and calls you daddy. The amount of uncomfortable is real, and the fact that Mr. Milchick does not want to consult Miss Cobel because she has been stressed is a joke. Like, come on, this is major, and of course we know this moment really does mess with Dylan.
I really wouldn't mention this to your colleagues, Dylan. This OTC is pretty neat to know. Understand?
Another massive red flag in 99% of situations. If you ever hear this from a manager, perk your ears. You will notice more and more they wish to conceal from you, and you may even come to study the things that they wish to keep from you. This feels like the don't discuss pay argument, where aside from protecting your own mental health, should you be the least paid member of your team, avoiding that conversation only stands to protect the company and allow them to pay the lowest possible sum to you and your coworkers. Looking at you again, Cisco Systems, you taught me well. Maybe not the best lessons, but I will never be the lowest paid member on any team ever again. Thank you for that trauma. Anyway, Mr. Milchick did just do some shady stuff and wants to hide it from his boss and the other people that could talk to his boss. It is weird.
I know this has been a tough quarter. I'm gonna see about wrestling you up some special perks.
And then he tries to buy his silence with a bribe. This is when Audi Mark enters the building, worries about getting caught with the stolen security guard from the murdered Mr. Graner, and then Mark S. pops up having no idea the bomb that he has in his pocket.
I'm here to escort you to your desk.
They walk to MDR, and then Mark sees the Titan walls that will keep them inside.
I prefer the phrase safely situated.
The rest of the team is there and ready to go, everybody uncertain and worried that management could dish out more punishment. Mr. Milchick leaves and then calls Miss Cobel looking for where she is and telling her voicemail that Mr. Graner is a no-call, no-show.
So I lean my upper body slightly forward, but it's just flying everywhere. Yes, like an angry fire hose. Oh, no.
It is a kind moment between these two, one that feels sincere on both sides, but with a little bit of an asterisk.
Now you try.
They include this moment of her throwing the practice doll on the couch extra hard, and I think it's meant to highlight that she doesn't actually care. This all sounds great and like it's accurate advice, but we know that she's there with ulterior motive. Also, the scene at Petey's funeral showed us how good she was at lying on the spot. So really, the scene is about showing us how much Devin is falling for it. And that is when we get to the tea of things.
Lumon? They say that they only sever people for work. I was thinking, like, what if you wanted a baby? But you didn't want to... I don't know.
It's a subtle act here, but the way that she fidgets directly after the question makes me think that she knows about severing for pregnancy, and she knows that it should not be talked about with the normies, which is why she changes the subject to Mark being severed. Perhaps she learned about this at Lumon, but perhaps it was either during or graduating the Myrtle Egan School for Girls, which could be a really, really dark way to show us the early stages of Severance testing or the Egan family philosophy and how they wished at one point to spread that into the world. But really, no telling at this point. It's not even outright confirmed, but if you could make women forget about being pregnant in a time of a decaying population rate, I think that you have a pretty haunting story to tell, even more so if the early stages of this were at the Egan family-funded female funhouse founded by Myrtle Egan.
Why do you think Mark did it?
She starts probing into Mark and then asks one too many questions, which ends the conversation.
Does Mark ever think he sees her?
This is when Irving tries testing the boundaries with Mark, creating a terrible story about how the bathroom soap dispenser could need a label and how O&D might have some insight as to why it does not. It is a fabricated story so that he can go check in with Burt, and they all know it.
If only someone had told you that going there was a shitty fucking idea from the jump.
Good day, refiners.
Mr. Milchick comes in and says that because Helly has reached 75% on the Sienna file, they will have a 5-minute dance music experience.
You have earned for you and your fellow refiners a 5-minute music dance experience.
Irving points out how she is only at 72%, and Mr. Milchick says that it's been a tough morning for everybody. Him starting this party early is odd. It feels like they're showing us how management is faltering more and more as the craziness continues. The hard established rule that you can only get this at 75% is broken, and even subtly, what else could be broken?
I choose Defiant Jazz.
This is when the party really gets going and we see some rather uncomfortable dancing by everybody here. Dance is a beautiful thing. It has existed for as long as we have had hips to move, and it can express parts of ourselves that we don't have words for. It is our body, interpreting sound waves, and without the culture of how to move, learned from others that you perceive to be wiggling better than you. You get what you're seeing here. They really don't know how to move, but they watched Mr. Milchick and tried to emulate some form of moving to a rhythm. I'm seeing children in the scene. Then, of course, Mr. Milchick starts dancing around Dylan super aggressively. Dylan clearly does not want to engage, but since this party is largely a hush-up party by Mr. Milchick to stop Dylan from talking about the overtime contingency, Mr. Milchick is trying his best to get him involved. Dylan starts seeing images of his son, the lights go red, the scene becomes scary quick, and the other members of the team see how Mr. Milchick is goading Dylan before he lashes out. Dylan bites him. The team rips him from Mr. Milchick, and then these stakes are realized.
I'm reporting this to Miss Cobel.
Yeah, you want to go see her together?
Mr. Milchick cancels the dance music experience and then storms out, leaving the team together to have a private moment to discuss what happened to Dylan last night.
They can wake us up. Last night, after I went up the elevator, I woke up outside in my house. I saw my son.
They move the conversation to the closet, and Dylan brings up how it isn't fair. He is just meant to have that mental image of his child for the rest of his life and never be able to see him again. Irving says that that isn't his son, but it's his Audie's, and Dylan believes otherwise. He believes that that is his son now as well, which shapes the gray line that separates the Innie and outside lives from the perspective of the Innie. He believes this is his child, and as such, he cannot believe that his life is separate from his Audie's, even if he must pretend otherwise. And who knows how long he has believed that as well.
We could use this.
During this conversation, they realize two things. They can use the overtime contingency to their benefit, and Mark has a keycard to the security office. They don't know why his Audi would have been able to bring that into the office today, nor why he had it at all. But it's curious that this worked so well.
Take it to work tomorrow, he'll know what to do.
Who will know what to do?
I've awoken you at home. I need to know where you put it.
We can find whatever they use to control it and, commandeer it.
I have long suspected Mr. Milchick of many things, and we are just going to add this to the growing list. Is it possible that he is a part of the organization trying to overthrow Lumon from the inside? It would be such a shock, and I think I want to do a whole video compiling all of the odd things that could align with this before season 2. But really, it is just a theory. I said before, it's odd that he used the overtime contingency to recover this tiny little card that he stole from O&D. And on further reflection, we know that it wasn't that concerning based on his behavior when we saw him alone in the office. Mr. Milchick takes his sweet time checking this new security measure, opening and closing the door repeatedly to create a comedic moment for us. But it also undermines the urgency of the moment and the card itself. He picks it up from behind the toilet like it was the afterthought, when really it was so important that he had to go behind his boss's back and reveal OTC to his subordinates. Some things just do not add up. The framing there really does feel like Mr. Milchick could have done all of this to make the workers aware of how they could escape, and Ragabi saying,
Take it to work tomorrow, he'll know what to do.
Who will know what to do?
You.
is because the entire plan is being discussed by the movers and shakers infiltrating Lumon, Milchick included. But I guess only time will tell.
Who's to say there are security guards? I've only ever seen Graner.
What about Milchick?
He can't be everywhere at once.
The whole line of
Do you know where the office is?
Irving has a great deal of discomfort in this discussion, but does not fight as hard as he might have at the start of the show. He is seeing the mistreatment and has been influenced by Burt as well. The Burt that found justifications for their minor infractions and fraternization that he wishes he could see above all else, regardless of the rules at this point. So while he certainly wishes for his team to know the risk, he isn't actively trying to stop anything from happening.
We can do this.
As soon as the doors open, Irving goes in the other direction, which it builds that tension about what he's about to do. Of course, we know he is going to see the love of his life.
I have to make sure Burt's okay.
What about the plan?
I'm sorry, Mark. I can't hear you. I'll be back.
They enter the security room and we see all of the cameras that record their entire existence. Helly then discovers a whole list of employees and departments that we have yet to meet. The list on screen are all the departments and names that I was able to make out and get from the Severance wiki. Shout out to them again, as always, great work over there. Most of this will remain obscure to us for quite a while, but you know me. The only departments known from this list are MDR and DNR. DNR is disposal and reclamation, and we only know this because we saw a sign briefly in episode 1. Disposal and reclamation could have some incredible menacing meaning, given, what we know about the break room and the possible theories that we have about optics and design being about the control of the employees in MDR, or the severed floor in general. We see server health monitor, the protocol on screen here. Last time I saw a hexadecimal formatted like this was in the earlier episode here, which I had no clue what it meant at the time, but somebody pointed out that it was correlating to the color codes on screen. So these two colors could be what it's saying, or it's saying these numbers here, like in decimal form, but it could be nothing at all, truly. We see server 13, 14, 15, 16A. This could relate to the last names, but it's not clear. These are only 4 of the 20 they have shown at the bottom, though it's not clear if those are even running or if it's only focusing on 4 of the active servers. We can see this section up here gives the user a direct way to message the board, meaning that this role has a major power, and them being here is kind of massive. It would be neat if this comes up in a future episode. If I had to guess, these charts are time-based, moving left to right, so servers 2 were using less resources at the start of the day and then used more toward the end. Whatever the resource is, I have no idea. It could just be fan speed, but the opposite happened for the 2 on the right as well. We see this IP address starting with, I think, is 286, which is not a valid IP address, but I don't think it will matter even if it was. This grid of 4-digit numbers that look like they could be pairing 2 sets of the numbers together, that's interesting to me. It could relate to why they made it seem like Petey started losing his mental when Mark was leaving the elevator. I talked in that video about how there could be some kind of link between the individual employees, like to each other, since that we can kind of prove that the lumen implants are networked to some degree. But again, really no clue. This little diagram here could, in theory, help us map the building, but truly, stuff like this is good for determining rough locations, and that's when it's clear, right? That's when you have clear text that you can read. It does look like a ton of devices are networked and managed from this security office, but again, something super important about charts like this could be showing us the building or the entirety of Lumen and how they are networked across state lines or however the corporation is set up. These little blurry icons kind of look like workstations, but if I had to guess what would be a switch in this setup here, it's a thing shaped like a lobster. So do with that information what you will. This does show an active log titled server CPU activity, which in the context of Severance makes me wonder about the information they're receiving from the individual implants. And if that is appearing on the screen here, 4 servers do align to 4 individual MDR workers, which could mean that each worker gets a server, but really no telling. As one final note, the upper section left here shows edit sequence, edit element. Edit sequence makes me think first of video editing, like they are editing the video stream of data, or the sequence of data, either going to or from the workstations, but it could also be DNA sequence or maybe like a cron job sequence, meaning that if they have like a routine health check of the servers, of the network, of the individual employees' implants or something like that, that would be the location to edit the timing to alert whoever is responsible to do so. Or they could automate it to make it do it automatically. The edit element, though, I really do not know. Element in this context could be another name for like the individual panel, like the design, the interface here, but I'm less sure about that. Like, what elements could they need to edit while inspecting the server's health and uptime? We then see the 23rd edition of the Quick Start Guide. Then we get a wealth of computer screen goodies. This is a different screen being viewed by Mark, and most apparently What this does is track elevators. We see 2 elevators for severed and 2 elevators for non-severed. We only know of 1 elevator, so I'm really not sure where any of these others are located just yet. We see at least 13 floors. The non-severed can access all of them. The severed can only access the conference rooms, AOC, and net.system. The 13th floor, which many buildings don't even have, doesn't have a name. Floor 12 is the machine, which is just so interesting. My first thought is the image by Petey here, showing this symbol here. It feels like the brain of the operation, or where the big bad is going to be stroking a really skinny cat. Executive suite feels pretty straightforward. SR, I'm not sure about. IT having its own floor right next to the conference rooms is the most IT thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Good job, writers. I have no clue what ACO is. Data P feels like it could relate to a data center, and net system, or net sys. No clue aside from networking, but a whole floor dedicated to a network system administration doesn't really make sense, because it's only ever going to be one guy in a dark room who is literally smarter than everybody else in the building, but nobody knows him. At least 3 floors exist below this one, and we see car A is departing the entrance, so a couple floors are left to add should they need more space in later seasons, and there could be stuff below the entrance as well, or it could start on 0 if they are actually a IT company. It's interesting that we see Miss Cobel arriving at this time, assuming that she came from above like everybody does. This would mean the entrance that car A is leaving isn't the entrance that we think it is. Entrance could have some super secret meaning here, or it could be telling us that Miss Cobel has made some stops before we actually see her, since she is leaving the executive suites and not coming from the entrance herself. Again, a lot of uncertainty here. My money is on the entrance being metaphorical, and it means like the entrance to hell or the real lumen that we have no idea about. This is all like the surface level stuff, and we aren't even at the gates of hell yet. I really like that. The very top up here also shows us some mind-blowing things. We see protocol settings, which could relate to anything, could relate to settings for the machines, could relate to settings for the implants, the protocols that they are about to look through in the book, anything like that. Global sensors, CCTV network, and net tracker all feel like they are screaming in my face that they are actively influencing the world with all of this, or watching the entire world with all of this. Net tracker could track individual Audis and their online activities. Global sensors and CCTV makes me feel like they are watching the entire world. Net tracker too. And in terms of collecting evidence for Lumen monitoring the world, I want to, keep this in the back of my mind from now on. This feels like it could be telling us more. But there is something to say about CCTV network could also be localized to a single site. Global sensors could also relate to networking sensors. So, we'll see what happens there. We see Helly flipping through the handbook. We see CL00944, clean slate cycle, which to me screams without any shadow of doubt that they have the ability to wipe an Innie's mind and restart them like it was Westworld. We then see Elephant access circuits, a subsystem activation routine. It's not clear, but elephants have incredible memories. They have incredibly dense brains, big booty boy brains, and this naming seems like it could grant the severed workers access to more of their long-term memory, or, do something with their memory. They do stress the importance of having supervisor permission with a lot of these pages, but both Miss Cobel and Mr. Milchick have done things without asking permission from their supervisors, so who knows? This is the branch transfer system, maybe relating to moving an employee from one department to another or one geographical building to another. We get a note about how the employees may suffer for this or from this. There's a lot of legible reading here, and you can see that on screen, but mainly it just stresses caution and then has a flowchart for troubleshooting. Right before the page turns, we see this tab in the book called Overtime, and then right above it, one we have not seen before, Open House. Now, to me, Open House is wild. It could be a protocol that allows people to come and tour the facility after hours or something like that, but open houses can also take place while families are sitting down for dinner. And this protocol, doing something like, I don't know, making all the workers just stand there like robots or fall asleep at their desk for 10 minutes while the big bosses show their enslaved workforce to senators that they're paying to spread corruption. I mean, that has kind of a nice ring to it. Finally, we see the overtime contingency protocol requiring 2 users and then some random information about the process. In the single frame that made this legible, we see another tab called Quiet Time, which literally used the exact same scenario that I just described. Quiet time? Are you kidding me? Let me hear in the comments what quiet time protocol could look like. If this is ever revealed, I will come back to these comments looking for whomever got it closest. The other tab here is synergy, which again, what does everybody think? It feels like if they had a forced team bonding section that Miss Cobel would have just used that instead of everything that she tried. So I don't really know. They eventually leave, freaked out about Miss Cobel entering the building, but not before Helly rips out the OTC protocol from the book. It is risky and it creates great tension. We see Miss Cobel walking the halls and then Irving. They make it feel like any of these rogue parties could cross paths with the boss, who would know that they are not meant to be roaming the halls anymore. And then, of course,
Doug Graner is dead.
the board wants to know if she knows anything, and more importantly, if she spoke to the police about him being missing. It shows a clear lack of humanity, as they care about the consequences they could suffer instead of the consequences that the man who just lost his life suffered. But that is exactly the point.
Whoever killed Mr. Graner is probably the same person who reintegrated Peter Kilmer.
Natalie kindly reminds Miss Cobel that their official stance, that as a manager of a severed floor, she should know, is that reintegration is not possible.
Reintegration happened, and I have the data to prove it. I would be happy to share my findings in person without intermediaries.
It is a bold move, and suddenly the board agrees. She is to meet the Egans at the Egan Family Gala next week and discuss all of her findings. Even Natalie is shocked to be receiving this information, and frankly, this is the first time it ever appears as though the board is real and talking to anybody in this story. Miss Cobel dogs Natalie here, and it looks like she enjoys it greatly. She just flew over Natalie's head with this interaction, and it was gorgeous. But yeah, Miss Cobel has some scary bones in her body. We see Dylan, Helly, and Mark discussing the OTC protocol, and Dylan instantly memorizes the instructions.
Trackball type, switch type, flip type, hold. But I'm smart.
They discuss who will stay behind and how it would require 2 people to do this, and Dylan, literally the smartest person in the room, says,
I think it's designed as a 2-man operation.
Great, I have the strength of 2 men.
This is when we see Burt G's retirement. Mr. Milchick and Burt both spot Irving as he plays the tape of his Audi giving the goodbye speech. They talk about him being there for 7 years and how he feels when he gets off work. He tries to talk about how much he must have enjoyed working with his coworkers and the job that he was doing, but then it really just highlights how little their lives mean to the real him, having no idea what their names even are, or if he even had coworkers, or if his time there meant anything at all. It's kind of sad by the end of it, and he checks his watch and ends the recording. The checking of the watch highlights this lack of sincere feeling for his inner self. He has things to do, and may have severed because he was a busy man on the outside. He has places to go, things to be, and he can't be bothered to sit and talk with his Innie self, who would give everything for more insight into the world that he already lives in. You know, not to mention that we're watching the virtual death of Burt G, and it's just...
You're all just gonna stand here and let him die?
Mr. Milchick tells Irving that this death is just a part of this life, and Irving goes in on him.
You smug motherfucker. You're not severed. You walk out of here with your memories. You carry them home with you every night.
The moment is tense and being done in front of all of O&D. After this brutal reminder that Mr. Milchick could never relate because he can go home and sleep in his own bed each night, Mr. Milchick tries to put an end to the outburst.
Like you never existed!
That's enough! You will go back to MDR.
Mr. Milchick, please.
Now, if Mr. Milchick is one of those that live in the Lumon housing, like underground, that Petey said was possible a few episodes ago, this moment could have a ton of extra depth. Mr. Milchick would, of course, be able to relate much more than Irving knows, and he was putting an end to the cruel words, not only because it was his job to do so, but because he was personally offended and just had to cut Irving off.
Like you never existed!
That's enough! You will go back to MDR.
Mr. Milchick, please. It'd be so wonderful to have him here.
Mr. Milchick does do the compassionate thing here, despite the uproar, and allows him to stay and say goodbye to Burt properly.
I don't know what's gotten into you people today.
They played the song Times of Your Life as everybody says goodbye to Burt, ending with Irving. The song takes a big focus on memories of yesterday and living in the moment because, like the song says, remember. Will you remember the times of your lives? It's a sad but peaceful moment that Burt and Irving are able to share together, and then Irving leaves, being escorted back to MDR by Mr. Milchick, tears in his eyes, having no ability to ever see this person that he loves again. This entire thing was a grand moment that made sure Irving finally saw this place for what it was. The doors open, and we see the entire team slowly pop up one by one to keep the attention that somebody could be missing, and then...
Let's burn this place to the ground.
Oh my God, what a moment. The team is assembled, the values align, it's time to lock and load, bring down the people that enslave them. We then see Audi Mark having a drink and scrolling on his phone. It is a dark moment, reflecting alone on what he just witnessed and the murder that he helped cover up. He searches Gaines College to see if anybody had discovered the body of Mr. Graner. We can see an article about a new sculpture possibly being pornographic, more coyote sightings than normal, the college president doing a charity dunk tank, the college selling inappropriate shirts, an ad for magazines, Interior G, which feels like it could be a subtle play on words. The name is structured like an Innie's name, Burt G, Interior G, Innie G. They do show an article about this college giving away scholarships for female students studying pharmacology and psychology, which to me just screams Lumen funding. Alexa comes to pick up her phone and the moment is tense. It's awkward given how things ended last time, and drunkard Mark wants to bone, but Alexa clearly does not. He is lying about what happened the other night, and she knows. Even worse, she knows that he tried to gaslight her to believe that he did not leave in his car the other night. He believes that she is upset because he isn't over Gemma, and to prove that he is, he takes out this beloved picture of his dead wife and rips it up in front of her silent face. It was sincerely heartbreaking on both sides. Mark did not want to do this. Alexa did not want Mark to do this, and she leaves without saying another word. Drunken Mark having zero clue in this moment.
What? Alexa, we'll talk all about Gemma. She was great.
He is left alone, once again in the dark, realizing how great his ex-wife was.
She was great.
He goes back inside and picks up the pieces of his broken picture and puts them back together, realizing fully how little he was over her. We hear him talking about his wife in the same way that Miss Casey reads information about the Audis to the Innies.
My wife was extraordinary.
Your Audi values water.
My wife was allergic to nutmeg.
Your Audi won a game 2 weeks ago.
My wife liked other people's dogs.
And then, of course, it's revealed that Miss Casey is Mark's ex-wife, Gemma. It's such a cool, subtle reveal, and the remark earlier about Miss Cobel asking if Mark ever said that he saw her now, like recently, means so much more. It means that she knows. She knows, without any doubt about it, that Gemma was Mark's wife, and she is questioning his sister because she knows that Petey was reintegrated, and that could be happening to Mark now too, since they don't yet know how Petey reintegrated. It's wild that Miss Cobel knows, though the true weight of this has yet to come to light. We can only continue to speculate about why graveyards lead to Lumen housing and how Miss Casey does not know her own husband on the inside. Is she severed? Is it something worse? Does all the stuff that Miss Cobel was doing for Mark on the inside, like sending him for a wellness visit and then studying it carefully, tell us more about what she was hoping to do? Was that a way for her to confirm Severance was still fully intact? Because otherwise it would have been obvious. His grieving on the outside appearing to be an unavoidable constant. But with that, we come to the end of the video. What an episode. I hope you enjoyed this. Please be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon to be alerted whenever new videos come out. It's almost time for Severance Season 2. And I am all systems go on the content creation side. Expect more videos, more short form, more long form, more theories. Support my efforts over on Patreon or simply leave a comment for the algorithm. Shout out to my bestie, Dan Erickson, showrunner of Severance. You heard me right, bestie. Much love, everybody, and I cannot wait to talk to you all again soon.